Welcome, Swamiji. Before I request you to start up your program with a beautiful prayer, I would just like to give a very short description about yours to our people. Friends, Swami Kriyananda is one of the very few living direct disciples of Paramhansa Yogananda, author of a spiritual classic, Autobiography of a Yogi. Swami Kriyananda founded Ananda Sangha, a worldwide organization for the dissemination of Yogananda's teachings. And there's a lot more to tell you about Swamiji, but I would request Swamiji to start the program. Yes, Swamiji.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnur, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Shakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I bow to my Guru. I bow to him and all of you. God bless you.
Thank you so much. We really require your blessings because without your blessings, we won't be able to do anything.
If you say mine, you're talking about somebody very little. If you talk of Bhagavan's blessings, that's everything.
We should say you're angel of God.
What is that?
You are one of the angel of God. You are going to give us more and more love because we cannot get direct love from God. I mean, you are the one who can give us love to us.
I do my poor best.
Thank you so much. Swamiji, there are so many people waiting for their questions. I would request you to answer those questions.
I will try.
Thank you so much. You may please ask your question.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
I'm Mansi from Jodhpur. I ask you, what does it mean to get rid of the ego?
You know, you can't get rid of anything because everything is a part of the infinite. But it is sometimes a distorted image. In fact, everything in Maya is a distorted image of the infinite. And so the ego is the soul identified with the body. Atman is ever perfect and it is our reality. But the ego is that part of our consciousness which thinks that we have a body, a mind, a subconscious and conscious mind. And the reality is we only have one mind, which is superconscious. We have no form. We're nirakara, without form. But the ego is the source of all our problems. The thought that I am hurt, that I want this, that I like that, I don't like that, I love this person, I hate that person. When we chop the realities that we see around us into all these different forms and into an attachment or aversion from different things, that is where ego comes in, and that ego is a delusion. We have to get rid of this thought of being separate from the infinite. It's really, I've given this illustration before, it's a very good one. It's one that my guru gave, of the sun shining on little slivers of glass. And each little sliver of glass shines, but only as long as the sun is shining. When the sun goes down, they all become dull and have no color and no light. And so each of us has light only to the extent that we are animated from within. The ego's problem is that it thinks it gets its animation from things. It thinks it gets love and joy and all the experiences of the world from the outer world. Everything is a reflection. We are a reflection. What we need to do is understand that that infinite one, which has become our little sliver of glass, is the same one who is in all slivers of glass, that is to say, egos. And the same self that is in me is in you. We are the same one person. But because of ego, we think ourselves separate. And we need to get rid of this thought, not the ego itself, because you can never get rid of yourself. That self is eternal. The entire universe is a manifestation of that self. And what is that self? Well, Adi Shankaracharya described it, defined it as Satchidananda. And my guru explained that that means ever existing, ever conscious, ever new. He added that expression, ever new bliss. This is the nature of creation, of the Atman behind creation, of infinite Brahman. And we need to realize that that is our true self. Now, the way to get rid of the thought that we're anything else is to try to always feel, well, Krishna gives the explanation in the Bhagavad Gita that first of all we need to practice nishkam karma. And he said that the difference between sannyas and tyaga is simply, sannyas is giving up everything, tyaga is not being attached to anything. We need, at any rate, it's the same thing really, we need not to be attached to anything. You need to feel that your family, your job, your children, everything is a part of the infinite, and nothing belongs to you particularly. Now, not every wife or husband would appreciate this in your attitude. It's a difficult role to play when you're married. And therefore, it is a good thing to be a sannyasi, but there's no point in being a sannyasi and going to the mountains and dreaming of parties in Delhi. So you'd better do what you feel you need to do to get rid of these thoughts. You have to live through many of them. You think you need lots of money. Then don't say, I don't need money, I don't need money. And your mind is always on money. Go ahead and get it, but try to give it back to God. And there's the next thing. Not just to give the fruits of your action to God, but feel that He owns everything, is doing everything through you. And you will find that if you can do that, that your creativity will be beyond belief. You will be able to do things you couldn't dream you could do, because you will understand that He does do these things through you. So to get rid of the ego is to feel that God acts through you, and then ask Him to act through you, so that every little thing that you want or need to do, ask Him first. Make Him your partner and bring Him into your action, and then say, well, God, how should I do this? How do you want to do this through me? Bit by bit, if you work on it. There's a book that I have in the bookstores. It's called Sadhu Beware. And it's really for sannyasis, but the idea of it is that if you feel important, or if somebody insults you or something, always say, it's not me he's insulting, it's just the infinite, it doesn't matter. Give everything back to Him. In countless little ways, we're always referring things back to ourselves. Give every one of those little things back to God. Feel it. It's His problem. He's the one who did it. Everything. He's the one who's important. I'm not important. The more you think that way, you see, the ego always comes in and says, yeah, but what about me? What about me? If you can get rid of that thought, even to that extent, you will feel so free. And ultimately, I know many years ago, I mentioned this in a lecture recently in Calcutta, I think it was there that I said this, that after a sermon that I gave in our church in Hollywood, many years ago, like in 1955 or something like that, somebody afterwards complimented me on my talk. And I said, God is the doer. And she said, oh, really? As if, well, I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good. Well, the thing is, she misunderstood. God does everything through you. He does your mistakes too, because you didn't understand better. He was the energy who helped you to make that mistake. But if you give Him the credit as well as the blame for everything, you find more and more you don't do those mistakes. And you will see that although He talks perhaps haltingly through you in the beginning, it'll become clearer and clearer the more you allow Him to work through you. Okay?
That's really wonderful, Swamiji, because we could never think about the answer that you have given. I mean, I, my is something which every one of us think about, and we think everything that belongs to the earth, that belongs to God, is again mine. It's either mine, it's me, it's I. But it's really difficult to...
It's a very liberating thought.
That's true.
And you know, the wonderful thing about these is, it's difficult to do, very easy to have done. Once you do it, there's nothing to it.
I know, you can make it so easy for us.
Well, I hope to.
We have a caller waiting for his turn. You may please ask your question. Hello.
Swamiji, namaskar. I am Amar from Patna. Swamiji, I want to know that can a person be married and have children and still find God?
You know, it's an interesting thing that most of my guru's highly advanced disciples were married. And yes, it's possible, and Krishna speaks of this. He says that doing your duty is the important thing, and some people's duty is to be married. Why is it their duty? Well, basically it's because they have that desire. But to be married in God, to feel that you are sharing your marriage with God, to feel that these are God's children you are raising, not only can you raise them in the best way, but you can also have none of that attachment that makes you feel, I want him to go this way, when my father, for example, wanted me to be an electrical engineer. Well, thank God, I simply didn't want to be an electrical engineer. I preferred being what I am. But can you find God like that? Yes, you can. This is where Krishna in the Gita talks again and again about Tyaga, not being identified with anything. Understand that he is the doer. And if you practice Nishkam Karma, bit by bit this understanding will come to you. And many householders have found God. My own Param Guru, Lahiri Mahashai of Benares, Varanasi, he was a married man. He was an avatar. That means he was liberated many lifetimes ago. But in this life, he did not get to meet his guru until he married, until he had children, so that he could set an example for people in the world that it is possible. Yes, don't be discouraged. So many people have told me, well, when I'm old, then I've finished my job, I've retired, then I will seek God. The trouble is that most people, by the time they retire, are too tired. And how do they find God? If they're tired, you've got to have energy. And however, I want to add to that my guru, there was one disciple of his. She had been for more than 80 years. She was in her 80s when she met him. She had been an atheist all that life. And when she met him, she became completely converted, and so completely that she would keep a bowl of marigolds, which are orange flowers, just to remind her of the color of his robe. She would play a recording he had made of a song, a chant, and she just thought of him. But he said she achieved mukti, she achieved freedom in that life. So do not worry about where you are. There are many swamis and so-called renunciates who might as well be living in the city. I don't say that necessarily they have worldly desires, but they have the worst of them all, ego. They think they are better than other people. That makes them worse. It's just this that they've got to get rid of. So don't think where your duty takes you. But I will add this, that if you are not married, and if you don't have children, I should put it the other way around perhaps, you perhaps are safer. There was one saint who met my guru when he was a boy. He asked my guru, "Are you married?" And my guru said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "You're safe, better stay that way." He said, "I'm married to a very worldly woman, and however, she doesn't know it, but I've escaped her." They lived in the same house. He meant he had escaped her because he was no longer identified with his ego. And he did, even in that situation, he found God. So don't give up hope.
That's so inspiring. We are so inspired by the views that you give us to us. And there are a few more callers waiting for their turn. Yeah, you may please ask your question.
I'm Nuda from Allahabad.
Yeah.
Swamiji, are there an infinite number of souls? Can they all incarnate at the same time?
Of which?
They are asking, the person asks, are there infinite number of souls? Can they all
Souls,
incarnate?
souls.
Yeah.
Well, God is infinite, and His creation is infinite. And when you speak of infinite, you know, the modern science says that this physical universe, this material universe, is not infinite, but finite. In other words, there are 100 billion galaxies, each one, or maybe 200 billion. Was it 200? I think it is. I mean, give or take a few million, who cares? There are that many stars in each galaxy. And this is finite. How is it finite? In fact, I can only think of it this way, that a thought is finite because it is only as big as you have thought it. The moment you think further, then it becomes larger. And so in that sense, this universe has been thought this big. It could be thought bigger, and it would become bigger and bigger. But the number of souls, mind you, they are not just on this planet. They're everywhere. This universe is teeming with life, you might say. And I've been reading a book on UFOs. It's very interesting how many different kinds of UFOs have been visiting this planet. And nowadays, with rapid communication and press coverage and everything, it's becoming more and more apparent that this has been going on for a long time. But that aside from it, there are When you speak of infinite, I suppose you have to say infinite because there's no way of limiting it to anything. God can create as many souls as He wants to, but those souls which come out in a Deya Brahma are a certain number. He can keep creating souls, but it's a very big show we're a part of. And the wonderful thing is that although it's so big and so infinite, and the question you have asked is a pretty abstract one, the important thing is about us. We are potentially infinite, and we need to think in terms of infinity. Don't think that you have any faults or problems. Your faults are, yes, infinite in a sense, because you've been around a long time, but you can get rid of them, and you can find that there is an end to it all. There's an end to the romance of your own existence, which, when you are out of it, will be so wonderful that the best novel in the world couldn't begin to describe the story of your soul from its beginning expulsion, you might say, from God to its final absorption in Him again.
Swami, it has been really wonderful, but one more thing.
Yeah?
She wanted to know each soul, does it incarnate at the same time? There's several souls in the planet, in the heaven, and she wanted to know whether they can incarnate at the same time. All of them?
All our souls? You mean us?
Everyone's.
No. I mean, yes and no.
Both.
Time is a delusion, and you want to get really abstract in philosophy, you can say yes, but in practical fact, no. You have one life, and you finish that life, then you go on to the next one, and as you put it, and as she may have meant it that way, it seems too abstract to really get into. It doesn't mean much. Are you living simultaneously with all your other lives? Abstractly, yes. Concretely, no.
That's so nice of you. Thank you so much for the answer. We are having one more caller waiting for you. Yeah, you may please ask your question.
Swamiji, namaskar. I am Lavkesh from Delhi. How can I develop devotion?
You know, devotion is the feeling in the heart.
Yeah.
Usually that feeling is associated with love. When a young swain has his heart broken because his girlfriend has gone to somebody else, he doesn't say, I have a broken knee. He says, I have a broken heart. We know, all of us, that this is where our emotions originate, our feelings originate. Now, devotion does not necessarily mean a sentimental kind of feeling. If you are a jnani, your devotion can be to truth. If you're a scientist, your devotion can be to science. And what it means, let us say you're a scientist. You keep bringing your intentions back and back and back again and again to the same point. That is certainly devotion. Devotion as love will certainly come in time, but I cannot think that a scientist who really... I used to want to be an astronomer, and I loved that subject, and I felt great inspiration from it. Well, this too is devotion. You have to have devotion, and that does not mean you have to be a bhakti, but you have to have bhakta. You don't have to be a devotee who sings the name of Krishna or Kali or whatever, but you have to have that deep aspiration of the heart. It's sort of like living next door to a good restaurant. If you know the menu abstractly, but you happen to like fish and chips, you won't go to that good restaurant. You'll go to some fly-by-night place that will just give you what you want. But if you know the menu, it's not enough. You have to want that menu, and that wanting is what devotion is.
It's really spellbounding. We all are spellbound with your answers. Still, there are a few more callers who want to have their questions. You may please ask your question. Hello?
Namaskar. Swamiji, I am Suraj from Dhanwad. Swamiji, does every karma have to be worked out? Do we just have to keep reincarnating until it is all finished? How long does
this go on? Well, it goes on a long time. But fortunately, there is an end to it, whereas there is no end to karma. Because you begin one karma and it sets all kinds of other things in motion. You drop one little stone into a lake, and the ripples go out, and then they hit the bank, and they come back, and they slowly slowly die down, but meanwhile you're dropping more and more pebbles. There's no end to it, but there is an end, and that end comes, first of all, in the state of Jivan Mukta. You realize that you are no longer the ego, you are the infinite. This comes with Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when you realize that it is the infinite who is acting through you. Even then, however, you are not completely liberated, because you still have to look back over all your incarnations and realize that it was God acting in all those roles and performing all those karmas. Mind you, a Jivan Mukta certainly creates karma, because every action is karma. But it doesn't come back to him because it's no longer tied to that linchpin of ego. So the work or the things that whatever Jivan Mukta does comes back, but it doesn't have to come back to him. It may come back to his disciples. It may come back to all of society. For one country to have great masters living it is the greatest possible blessing. In the Jewish Bible, in the Old Testament of what we call in the Christian religion, the Old Testament, there is the story of a city which God said he would destroy unless there were at least 10 righteous men there. That means righteous in the eyes of God. Any country that has even 10 people who know God, that is their greatest salvation, their greatest guarantee of safety. And many people think, well, what are those yogis doing for humanity up in the mountains? Well, they're doing the best thing anybody can do. No one can do what they are doing. The blessings that they emanate are what have kept this country alive when every other country in the world succumbed to the degenerating influences of Kali Yuga. Only India, we are now coming up into another yuga, and we're up in Dwapara again, an age of energy where people realize that matter is energy. But in this, only India has preserved its civilization intact, somewhat battered, but intact. And now is the time. My Guru, in his explanations of the Gita, showed how the explanations of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita are based on the understanding that matter is energy. He says in the Gita that this yoga is been lost, but now it's coming up again. And the reason yoga was lost was because yoga is based on the energies of the body. When you don't know what energy is, how can you teach yoga? All it becomes is hatha yoga and various other things, but not the real science of yoga. And so this is the science of yoga is what will bring you up to that stage where you realize that you are not identified with anything. In that stage, if it envisions, you can see an entire incarnation and see give it all to God and see that God was active in that incarnation, and so you can be freed from that. A paramukta, siddha, is somebody who has freed himself of all his incarnations of karma. There is an end to it, but it is only possible when you get out of the ego, which is the causative force of karma.
Swamiji, we have been talking about karma. Do our present karma, whatever we are doing right now, it's going to affect our future as well?
Of course it will.
It's going to affect
Oh,
us.
yes. I mean, everything you are today is the result of what you have done before.
Okay.
Look at all the faces you pass in the city. They're not just the result of their parents. You can see, I mean, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. What can you do with that? But it's amazing, the variety.
That's
that every face is stamped with its own consciousness.
That's true.
And the consciousness in the Gita, Krishna speaks about what we are is really the result of a mixture of the gunas, which are infinite. And this mixture in different mixes produces each human being, but we are not what we seem.
Swamiji, you have really given me an answer which I could never think about. I and my friends, we used to discuss a lot about spiritualism, but we never had such a good topic with us, and we never had these answers with us.
It's time for Hinduism to grow beyond being Hinduism and to become once more Sanatana Dharma.
Ah, that's really nice. Swamiji, I would just request you to give a wonderful tip to my entire people, or my entire viewers.
I have prayed to.
Yeah.
You know, I have just finished a commentary on the Gita based on my Guru's commentary. It is 636 pages long, so it's a long book.
Yeah.
But it will be out in February or March. And
That's nice.
I know it's a great book. Not mine, his.
Oh, that's really nice of you. We have really gained a lot of knowledge from you.
Thank
We'll
you
be
very
continuing it further also, but for today, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.